So, hi everyone, and yet we are back with another session of Alumni of the Week, and this time we have Vivek Reghunathan with us. So, hi Vivek.
Hello, Bhavsha.
Awesome, awesome. So, let me give you guys a quick brief about what right now Vivek is doing. So, right now Vivek is a product manager with Tektronix, and we are going to have an amazing story how he came from an engineering background, a guy working with as a senior key account manager and transitioning into product role. So, we'll be hearing a lot about how did he made his transition. So, let's get straight into it. So, a quick thing about you. What are you up to these days?
So yeah, from a career point of view, as Bhavisha told, I'm into product management right now in a company called Tektronix. So the company is into a typical electronics embedded space, what you normally learn in electronics and electrical engineering. I know that these days people are more into B2B, B2C, SaaS companies, but I'm a bit different where I am a bit more technically oriented and doing things which are in the semiconductor consumer electronics market kind of things. So yes, so currently I have been in close to an year in the product management role. I typically handle the data center markets as well as the consumer electronics market. To take a typical example, let's say the USB drives or USB ports that you use these days, we work closely with the people who are into early stage of development in that, ensuring that they are able to come out with the products which meet the market requirements, right? So
Yeah.
that's at a very high level. Anything specific, Bhavishya, you let me know. I can go into details for
Sure.
as long as you
But
want.
yeah, sure. So, very glad to know. So, you are working with very a core competency part, like deep into electronics. And for the first time, I'm hearing someone really closely work as a product manager, working with the hardware part of the computers.
Yeah.
Mostly, we do have people coming from the software SaaS and or B2B, D2C brands,
Yes.
right? And you're
Yes.
closely working with the ports. You started from an engineering background from electronics only.
Right.
So how this whole thing came into the picture, like from starting, like how you came to know about as a product manager, the whole
Yeah.
terminology itself. So yeah,
Yes.
after your college, what was the
Uh, Yeah, so I went the typical route, right? After school, you go for engineering. You do
yeah,
I took up electronics engineering. I initially thought mechanical would be a good choice, but then realized, even though by chance I took up electrical and electronics, and no, it was good in college. I realized that I liked working with some of the projects that I used to do. So we represented the college in some of the things that was happening, got recognized in some of the international forums. So all the things, what normally happens in a electronics background. After that, I got into a role in a company called National Instruments. And I was, in fact, I think that was the kind of moment when I realized. So I got into a role which is called as an engineering leadership program, right?
okay,
So what they do is that they take guys coming straight out of college, and they put in a role which is called this ELP or engineering leadership, and they give you opportunities to go across different functions in the organization, right?
okay,
So at a time, I started off by doing typical customer support, right? This typical customer support, however, we deal with companies in the highly technical space. Like we would get calls from, for example, in India, right? You would get calls from ISRO, the scientists who are using our
right,
products.
right,
So you need to understand what they really want to solve at a platform and technical level, and then solve the problem for them basically. So
right,
that really kind of helped me to understand the problem that you see in front is not the real problem. You
hmm,
need to communicate properly, you need to get to the roots of it, and then very systematically kind of get to the root cause of it, and then troubleshoot and figure out it.
yeah,
So that was really good learning for me, right? Because that kind of raw experience, it's difficult to get at a very initial stage of your career. So I'm really thankful for the company for that. And as I said, right, then I swapped between the roles. I was in a marketing role in between. Then I
okay,
did a typical training program kind of role. Then I was in a sales role. And so this kind of helped me to really understand like what each of these functions offer. right? And through the process of it, I really understand. So that's one thing, right? When you get out of college as a new guy, you have certain expectations, right? What really
Yeah.
happens, but to really understand what happens, you need to really get into that space and try your, get your hands dirty and really understand the feel of it, right?
Hmm.
So this series of things really enabled me to think in a perspective where I wanted to be really close to the customer. I understood that I could communicate properly to them. And when you kind of solve a problem for the customer, it really makes sense. That's all about what we do in engineering, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise you're just going about things. So after that, I moved into a proper account management role. So
Hmm. Right.
I used to manage all the ISRO accounts in the south as well as north part of India. And that was again a really good experience, right? Because if you look at all organizations across India, you get into ISRO, there are like dedicated folks who are trying to solve everyday problems, and you are in midst of them trying to understand how you can help them out. And then all the typical non-technical aspects also come into pack, like managing the partners, ensuring that
Yeah.
negotiations goes through, so all the firefighting kind of things, right?
Yeah.
And then I got into a bit more senior role in another company called MathWorks. So all engineers out there would have used MATLAB sometime or the other.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
yes. So MathWorks is the makers of MATLAB.
Oh, right.
I got into a global role there where I was collaborating with. So I was the person responsible for a product in India, and then I was working along with across the regions and closely working with the R&D team so that the product goes out right in terms of communication and messaging, right? So this also kind of really helped because I got to understand. So I was working at the ground level in my initial company, and then in this role I really understood how to talk to leadership, how to do stakeholder management.
Okay.
uh,
Hmm.
and it's a different ball game, right? You really need
Right.
to be
Hmm.
crisp, precise, to the point, and communicate the message, make your presence be felt there. And then, so a culmination of all these things, I realized I wanted to be a bit more higher stage where I was taking more direct decisions. I
Yeah.
wanted to, go do the research, talk to the customers indirectly, because I didn't want to take calls day in and day out, right? To be very
Right.
honest,
Hmm.
uh, cold calls and sales calls really used to disappoint me, because if you are in sales, you know that, there is 1% chance of getting to a successful prospect from all the things. So that really
Yeah.
bored me. So I thought I could do better by working a bit more closely with the customer at a high level, working with key accounts, key decision makers, and then really impacting the product from that stage. So that is when I started really thinking about product manager kind of roles. And
Hmm.
I started speaking to a lot of people, right,
Okay. Hmm.
who were in the B2C space, in the healthcare space. There were some of my seniors who had moved into companies like Gojek, and
Yeah.
there is the Apollo Health Pharmacy kind of companies which are there, right? Typical product management roles which are there. And I realized that even though I had done all the things except for managing engineering teams, right? Being in the scrum meetings,
Yeah.
deciding the story points and
Mostly.
all
Yeah.
those
Oh.
things,
Hmm.
in product management, all the other things I had kind of touched upon, and I understood that I could make a story out of it, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So but even though that was the case, to get to that first filter within the job interviews, right,
Hmm.
it becomes difficult, because you have typical marketing roles. So I could get acceptance to typical marketing kind of product management role or growth kind of product management role, but I wanted a much more holistic experience, right?
Yeah.
So when I spoke to people, I realized that either I should, because I was already 5 6 years experience that time. And
Hmm.
to be very honest, when you're 5 6 experience company in an MNC, yeah, shifting to an APM kind of role, you will have to take a hit at your salary, right? To be very honest, and then you
Yeah.
go down. I could do that as well, or you take side internships, you take a hit in your salary and then come back and get some more experience of a typical product management role in a B2C SaaS kind of companies and then go back.
Hmm.
Also, I had option of doing this, and also I had option of, so what I was good at is in this space I had the domain knowledge, right? I knew the customers, I knew what they were doing, I knew their typical problems, right? So I knew that with this domain knowledge I could shift to a product management role within the same domain.
Within the
I
same
could go
domain.
to the interviews and talk to people and then really get that part sorted out. So I tried both ways. I got both options. I got into a B2C SaaS kind of role. It was a startup role. They gave me an offer letter and they were waiting for 2 months. They had some budget constraints, what typically happens, some funding issues and all. That was a product management role itself, but I had to take a slight hit in my salary, right? And then
Okay.
other hand, I had this role which I'm doing currently, which was where I knew the domain and the problems, and it was a growth kind of thing for me.
Okay.
So
Okay.
then I just went about and started doing
Awesome.
this roles.
Awesome. Awesome. That's a quite a nicely put a timeline through. So what was the exact point when you came to know about the the PM role? Because
Yeah.
you were already juggling with so many verticals, right? You have
Yeah.
worked with customers facing roles, then you have managed stakeholders already, right?
Yeah.
You have played a very crucial role in sales as well. So kind
Yeah.
of you were dealing with all the other verticals, which generally it's kept in mind while seeing a product manager. A person needs to be fine with all the verticals, right? He needs to, since he is collaborating with other verticals, right?
Yes.
So when you came across the very first thing, when you came across the PM terminology itself, and then while you were already on a usual path, didn't it strike for a while that maybe I can opt for an MBA? I mean, we usually get this thought, right?
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
to crack into a PM role or to get
Yeah.
that growth that you were talking about.
In fact, I thought about MBA as well,
Hmm.
but then I spoke to a lot of people, right, who did MPS. I had
Yeah.
colleagues who did from tier one colleges outside of India as well as within India, the
Within India.
ISBs, the IAMs, and outside of India. And I think that always it's dependent on uh, what you want to get out of it, right? What I realized is that even if you do an MBA from, and this is my thought, okay, it could
Yeah,
be completely
definitely.
wrong. If
Hmm.
you do even from a tier one college within India, let's say the ISB or the IAMs, if you are looking for just a platform to get into a different role,
Hmm.
it may not serve the purpose. It do serve the purpose in terms of talking to like-minded people and getting to know the ecosystem better.
Yeah.
You might get more visibility and your skill set increases. But if it is for shifting the job, for example, a typical product management role, right? Tomorrow, if I am interviewing a person for a product management role, I would rather try to understand what all he has done through his experience, what are the things that he has gone through and gained experience in it. And if even if he has, of course, in the ISB, if you have an interview like a degree from ISB, I would have filtered him earlier, right? That is the
Yeah.
best thing. You get filtered
Hmm.
early in the job process, but through the job interview process, that wouldn't really matter to me, right?
Yeah.
It's about the experiences. So I realized that without doing an MBA, I could do this. And I just, thought I'll just go out there. And that is when I thought about HelloPM actually, right?
Okay.
Because I in fact knew that I knew after talking to people, I've got these relevant experiences, but I really wanted to understand what is a market experience outside of the companies that I have worked on in terms of what is the expectation of a product management role, right? And yeah, that's when I came across and saw that Hello PM is a good one considering at a high level to understand. And yeah, so that helped me. I think that's why I
Okay.
took a call of not going for MBA.
Yeah.
But if you have kind of relevant experience and if you're a bit more earlier in your career, it may be a good chance to take up an MBA earlier. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, right. So, since we are already on the timeline of when and how you got to know about Hello PM, so like how did you came across Hello PM at first? I would like to know, like while as in researching or like from a reference. How you got your
I just Googled it. So I was
okay
Googling through, a typical research thing. I just
typical
Googled all
research.
the product management courses. Then
Hmm.
I got into four of them. Then I
Okay.
put filters on what is the content covered, what is the, course fees, what is
Hmm.
the kind of testimonials that I've heard. I spoke
Hmm.
to, I think, product school or different of the things, people who have already taken it,
Already. Right. Right.
got the feedback from them, and then decided that at a high level, at an I want to get into this understanding at a much more affordable way. I felt
Hmm.
that HelloPM was the course that I could try out.
Hmm. Hmm.
What happened is that through the course, what really helped me is that I got to know a lot of terminologies which was not typically used in my industry, right?
Yeah.
And so I could connect that terminologies to what I was doing before. So
All
that
right. All
kind
right.
of really helped. Yeah.
Cool. So, just to have a the view of the timeline, at the
Yeah.
point of time when you joined HelloPM,
Yeah.
you were working as a key account manager, the senior role, right? Or you were working with
I was working with MathWorks at that time.
MathWorks. You were working
Yeah,
with
yeah, I was working
MathWorks.
with MathWorks at
Okay,
the time.
and there
Yeah.
already you were dealing from the product end. Somewhat you were dealing with the
Yeah,
product
it
end
was a
in India.
pseudo product role. Yeah,
So
except
pseudo
for
product role.
managing the direct engineering teams. Rest of the things I used to do. Yeah.
Okay, okay. What was the experience in terms of, as you mentioned about the terminology, right?
Yeah.
And what other things that you found interesting while you were within the community that really helped you later on? Yeah.
So I think other than the thing which I mentioned, there was some gaps that I could realize, right? See, you could do a very layman kind of effort, right? Everything
Right.
that you're doing in product management, you could do better with the tools and resources out there. So, what kind of tools to use for market research? Uh, Even though to the depth part, it's about getting introduced to it, right? That that there is a tool out there. What is the things that you use for market research? What are the things that you use for a customer VOC?
Hmm.
What are the framework and structures for it? So I got introduced to some of the things which were not you know not readily in my mind, right?
Right. Hmm.
So even for after releasing a product, getting the user analytics,
Hmm.
finding out insights from user analytics, then going back and work. So as I said, I worked little with directly the engineering teams, so I think there was a technology part also within that.
Yeah.
So kind of understood the terminologies. It is pretty straightforward, but then still you need to spend some time to just get a understanding of it. So the tools and the technology part I could understand better, and then I took up some projects. And okay, what happened is that with these tools introduced, there was some projects. So I remember
Yeah.
we did a project on CRED in terms of how to increase. Yeah. So within CRED, there was something like the CRED was introducing a new loan kind of feature, right?
Yeah.
So
Back
basically,
then it was releasing the loan utility part. Uh, yeah.
yes, right. So there was a project in order to understand how could you get more acceptance for the loans from a customer base, and how you could increase the percentage of people who really want to go for it. So we used some of these tools. I did a research among my close friends, right? Because CRED is used by everyone. So I went out and asked questions to some of my friends, and then came back and tried to put it together in a project. So using those tools within that project also kind of helped. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. So, while you were working around the community, while you were, I would say the articulation point of view that you mentioned,
Yeah.
it rightly helped you to articulate things in a better format,
Yeah.
right? So, as you mentioned about the project and assignment, so is it like the theoretical from your perspective, what's more important, like the theory part within the community or the assignments that people need to focus on?
Of course, the assignments, right? It's it's a common thing, even if you're doing engineering or whatever
Yeah.
things, unless you take it and try it out, it doesn't really help.
Mm.
And it was funny, right, when we were talking to people who are all attending the same course. It was kind of a not pseudo, a 10% introduction of how differences in opinion can come in, right, between teams. So we were working on this CRED project and people like, you know, you should do like this, we should do like this. So it's good. Of course, you use the tools and do into practice and exercises and
Right.
assignments. That's the best part about it.
Right. So definitely, I mean, see, engineering, while we were in engineering, like I do also come from the engineering background. So we usually know how the assignments back then we used to work on
Yeah.
assignments, right?
Yeah.
In the college.
Right.
But here, another important part is what worked well for you, or what would you suggest would work well for others also? Like working the assignments they are working on, or probably the projects, probably the tear downs they are working on. Is it good to work within a set of group of people, or a standalone chance would be a better takeoff, or like
Uh,
50-50? Yeah.
I think when you get into a real product management role, it's always role. It is always working with other people. So what I typically do, and of course, the same happens in once you get into the role, you get very little time to go back and do things. Right, you will be thinking on your feet a lot. You will be, you know, managing people around. So doing a pre-work initially always helps if you get time for it, and then going and working with groups, of course. So it's do the initial work, and it's like, you know, if you can dedicate a lot of time for initial work, you will do better in the meetings and
Meeting.
discussions. It's you know, it's
It's
straightforward.
straight.
So that's what, right, everyone thinks about product management. There is a lot of things to do, but normally it's just common sense, working with people and thinking on your feet. So
Yeah. Do you really
yeah.
think that product management or getting into a PM role is really that difficult? What people have created a huss around?
From a non-product management role, if you're coming to,
Hmm.
there is definitely things you have to work on, right? It is not
Right.
straightforward. For
Yeah,
example, my
definitely.
wife works in software development, right? For her, it's straightforward. You put in your skills, that is what the company wants, and you go for it.
Yeah.
Even if in your sales, right? Moving to the next sales role is not so difficult. The problem with product management is that it's very gray, right? Each company thinks of product management in their own way.
Their own
So
way.
what you need to do is that uh, if you are going for a role or anything, you need to figure the part out, right? What they actually want. So if you are able to figure that part out of what your potential or your prospects looks like from a job opening, talk to
Yeah.
people there and understand what they really need, and you are able to communicate properly when you're interacting with them,
Yeah.
I think it it's not so difficult. But there is a barrier, right? You jump the barrier, you think that okay, it's straightforward, but you need to talk to a lot of people to get to that initial understanding. That's what I felt normally confuses people.
Right, right. And also there is quite a lot of skepticism around, like people from non-tech background will be hard for them to get into the PM role, or people
Yeah.
coming from various verticals, like as you mentioned, like coming from sales, SDE, or maybe analytics part.
Yeah.
So what's your thought process and your take on it? Okay, is it really that people need to be that skeptical around getting into?
See, if you have, for example, it depends on the companies, right? For example, if the kind of company that I'm working with, if you don't know anything about electronics, then it becomes a bit difficult to talk about it. But if you're looking from a generalist point of view, there are a lot of companies where you don't need a technical background also, right? But the thing is that yeah, so one, it depends on the companies. If you're
Yeah.
going to a very technical company, if you want, in the end, you know, you will realize once you get into product management that you will need to get the people to hear you, right? It's you need to prove your credibility again and again. So if you're going to a very technical kind of company, that will help you,
Hmm.
right? Without that also you can manage, but it'll be
Okay.
easier for you to build your credibility there. But there are a lot of things in product management which are non-technical also, right? And I would say communication is the biggest part of it. Analytics is a big part of it. Managing people is a big part of it. And if you're ready to take ownership, right. Yesterday I was seeing a reel where people say, there is this typical thing, right? What does product manager do? He doesn't
Yeah,
code.
there is some viral reel going around, right? What do you
There's a
do
viral.
actually?
So my wife is a software developer, and she forwarded me the reel yesterday
Yeah,
saying that, this is what you do, and you guys say that we don't do the work, right? So the thing is that the reason why I told you is that you need to take really ownership of the role. If I was answering that reel, I would say that, I go to users, I get what they want, I try to solve, get the real root cause of the problem, come back to my team, convey it to them, make them do the work, ensure that it is coming on time,
yeah,
build a roadmap. So it's it's
everyone
it's
same
it's
page.
it's it's a lot of things you do, right? But
Yeah,
you could
yeah.
always articulate in the way. But
Hmm.
coming back to your point, from a non-technical background also, if you are ready to take ownership and learn through the process, I don't think you need to be in you needn't be a software developer to get into the role, if that is where you're coming from.
Okay, okay. As you mentioned about couple of skill sets, right? Like communication, what we have, then
Yeah,
stakeholder management, we have, then
yeah,
analytics is also one of the important aspects. So a little
yes.
light upon all these pointers, right? From a PM perspective, what do
Mhm.
a product manager do it? How they do it differently, or what is the efficient way that people usually work around? Because communication, people might consider like they already do communication. What's different from a PM's point of view, right? And then yeah.
Yeah. So the communication, the most important part is, right, what I have felt, at least, it's
Hmm.
about, okay, one thing is communication. What is the next thing you told me? A lot of things. I don't want to
Yeah.
go about everything,
So
but
communication and stakeholder management, right?
okay.
Majorly
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have, right, and bringing everyone on same page with both of these together, right? So
Yeah. So communication, the main thing is you will have to put yourself in the shoes of the listener and try to understand what is that they want to get out of the conversation, right? For example, you need to talk to the customer, right, to get the insights, but you don't directly go to them. You need to go to the salespeople,
hmm.
and what the sales guy wants will be one thing, right? So what you need to understand is what you talk to the customer, what you talk to your manager, the VP of product, what you talk to the sales guy, all of these will be very different. And most importantly, the thing to understand is, I talk to sales guy, I know that he has to meet the targets, he has to build relationship with the customer, he
Right.
needs to give confidence to the customer. So if you have to get him to take to you for an interview, you need to ensure that at least you are tick marking one of them, right? So then you talk in that perspective. When you go into the customer, you understand, depends on personas of customers also, right? If you are talking to a highly technical guy, an architect, you talk in one way, and you know that his thing would be to solve the technical problem, so you talk in that language. If you're talking to his manager, for him it would be the roadmap which is important, right,
Yeah.
whether commitments are met. So it's about stepping into their shoes and then articulating it properly, taking ownership and communicating it. uh, it's difficult to learn outside, but it through practice, you kind of, and I'm a noob in that, right? I'm still learning to get through all these things, but this is the thing which I felt most relevant about communication.
Okay, okay. That makes sense. I mean, while you are communicating with people, you need to have sort of their perspective, and
Yeah.
that's why it's highly needed that PM needs to have that empathy to connect
Yeah,
with.
and and that's the most bit empathy part, right? And there is a constant clash between the technical people and product managers always. So then it
Hmm.
becomes a totally different language. You come back, you can't push your technical team to deliver, because we want to deliver everything, right? Out of it you can deliver only two of things. That is a constant struggle for any product management role. So then you
Hmm.
need to come and talk in a different way to the engineering team, so that their bandwidth, everything is considered. So that's another
So,
part of it.
a quick glance about what sort of clash, if you can remember from the past, like among usually people find, like
Yeah.
on a generic note. Yeah.
Yeah, clash. So I should be very honest, product management is not a fairy tale. You get into conflicts and interest on a day-to-day basis. You can't be a good boy in front of everyone. We are working with some customers right now where we are coming up with a new platform. There are beta engagements which is
Hmm.
going on. So you go in and then convince a customer, then you take the timelines from them, and then you realize those timelines cannot be met with engineering, and then you really try to understand how you can find a middle ground and get both the parties happy. So that's
Right.
that's a constant thing in product management. So
Hmm. So again, as one thing struck me here, right? I mean, there are a lot of features that could be suggested from the sales team, right? Coming
yeah,
from the customers and coming from the sales team, and
yeah,
then you need to get those features being implemented with the tech team, right?
yes,
So
yeah.
how do you prioritize before going to the tech team? First things, if there are so many features or possibilities coming your way. So what is that one thing that helps you prioritize, one or two things that help you prioritize, and then how you take up those things? How do you articulate those things in a manner that it's more suggestive format for an engineer to go ahead and we can implement this.
Yeah, it depends on company to company. I work very closely with the sales team and the customer team to understand, what is their priorities, right? Because in the end, if revenue doesn't come, all this effort is a waste. So you really try to understand what of those features, which is not good to have features, but must have features and which will bring in revenue to the company.
Yeah.
You get to a priority list from their side. There are typical frameworks that we use for this, right? There is a WSJF kind of framework where you put in what is the business value that the particular feature brings in, what is the time criticality or risk reduction that it brings in, what is a future opportunity enablement when that brings in, and then how much time we will take to deliver that feature. And then you sit with the team across, you take certain inputs from the customer side sales team, and then you take inputs from basically how much time it will take from
Right.
engineering, and then you kind of get to a WSJF kind of value, right? And then you will realize this is not a thing you can put into the framework and really prioritize. Then you take that
Hmm.
and then go back to customers and actually go and ask them, right? uh, do you really think this is right? Do you really think this is right? And engineering, so it's back and forth a lot of things. There are frameworks to do it, but in the end it is aligning with what are the priorities for the customer always, and
Okay.
what can bring in revenue for you.
How was the interview experience? Because from a PM's point of view, previously you were working in some sort of similar formats, but for the
Mhm.
first time you must have come across the interview process, right?
Right.
So how was the whole experience, the interview experience?
Yeah, so the interviews are never straightforward, right? Each of them is
Right.
different. What I had from a B2C SaaS kind of interview was one thing, and here it was a different thing. So as I said, right, here what I'm doing right now is the domain that I was working in. So the questions were more in terms of the problems which are there in that domain, uh, how customers typically see those problems and how you can manage it. In a B2C SaaS kind of company, it was because I didn't have domain expertise there. It was more not open-ended. It was not very specific questions, right? You take up generic problem statements and then try to understand. For example, I think one of the example question is I think I got is your there is some kind of so that someone understands what I went through. I'll just take an example. I
Yeah.
think that would be better. So there is a conference happening and there are people coming in cabs, people who are coming in bus, and everyone is there, and you want to build a carpooling kind of thing right there. And how would you approach this thing? So the all the thing about this question is not reaching to the solution, right? But how you think through the problem. First of all, really understanding, is there a need for a carpool service there, right?
Yeah.
So then you go about and express your thoughts about where it is, whether it is required or not. And if it is required and you get a consensus that it's a problem worth solving, right? PWS, what we typically
Hmm.
call. then you get into the technical, not technical aspects, right? It could be as simple as just getting a Google Forms out there and getting review and feedbacks and getting people together. So it's not about the end solution. It's about the what they try to understand is the process in which you think through, and whether you are able to think on your feet and try to get to solutions and communicate it effectively. I think this also helped from HelloPM. There were I remember Ankit was taking many of these classes, and uh, Ankit, and as well as from Paytm, there was this.
Nevedya
Yes,
from.
yes, Navedya. Navedya was really good in this. You know, he used
Hmm.
to give a lot of typical scenarios, and Ankit also used to give the scenarios, and they used to explain their experience of how they approach these problems and guide you through. So then you kind of understand, oh, okay, this is what works, right? This kind of thought process, and that really helps when you go to interviews. You can just think out loud, and it's not about how effective solution that you bring into, but the process of thinking through it. So that's another
Yeah.
thing which I think HelloPM helped.
But
Yeah,
people consider product managers as a mini CEO. So is it really same, or is it, what is your take on it?
I would say in product manager, the manager title is only in the title. Uh,
Okay.
you have to go into each of these discussions and prove your credibility. It's a swaggy thing to say that you are a mini CEO, right? But
Huh,
you can't say that the product is under your control, right?
right.
It's under engineering control, it's under customers control,
That's true.
so it's under sales control. In fact, I realized uh, there's a lot of stake for sales team in this, right? They are
Hmm.
your best friends, and unless you align with them, nothing goes straight, from a sales point of view and from a stakeholder standpoint also.
Hmm.
So yeah, in my interview also the profile said CEO of a product, but I feel that product manager itself, that manager title is just namesake. So I
Namesake.
don't think it's not that swaggy. Okay, so never come to product management role thinking that you are going to be the boss of things,
Boss,
but
right.
you are going to be
Right.
the guy blamed for everything, and then you have to figure out the
That's a very nicely articulated thought.
it's and if okay, I had a thought process very initially, okay, initial in my career, that okay, product managers, they'll take a week to sit, write down the features, think about market research, do a lot of
Right.
brainstorming, etc. That doesn't happen. You don't get time for it. It'll be day in and day out calls, and you'll have to think on your feet. So that's what
Okay. Yeah.
happens.
Okay. So, lastly, the couple of closing and questions. So, what would your advice would be for all the aspiring product managers? Couple of things that they should really focus on, and
Mhm.
things that are, really putting them, that are diverting them. Okay, which are not really needed, and they
Yeah.
should need to focus on these particular aspects. So, yeah.
Right. So I would say to anyone who wants to move into a product management role, first of all, uh, in whichever space they want to go, right? First, talk to some people, understand what is the expectation of the role. Then you keep trying in different ways. But then the main thing is that whatever job that you do, right? Whether you're in sales, whether you're in engineering, whether you're in there are aspects of product management that they can do within their role itself, and that would help them in their interviews later. So first you understand from people what is expected out of the role, and till you crack the interview, try to do things within your role which would help you in the future prospect, and I'm sure that it is there. And
Hmm.
also, if possible, build a portfolio of your apart from your regular job, take up projects, go to product teardowns, uh, read books. I should be reading more books, I don't do that, but read books. I think get into a lot of projects apart from your typical role, so that when you go into an interview you have things to talk about.
If you were to start today your journey of getting into a PM role,
Yeah.
what would the specific things you would do, and things you would do differently now? A quick one. Yeah.
Yeah, things I would do different. I would do a lot more of side projects. I signed up for a couple of product teardowns, there is an app called Simple, right?
Mm.
Which is a pay later kind of app. So they had a product teardown. I kind of prepared the deck for it, but I didn't go through with it. So I would really advise people, other than doing responsibilities within their current role, to take up a bit more of side projects. So you have more things to talk about, and it really helps in the future prospects. So get hard
Okay.
into it, get your hands dirty, and try to gain as much experience as possible.
That's quite an interesting talk that we had, and it was really amazing session that we had. And thanks a lot, Vivek, to joining us here and coming here and sharing your experience with the community. I definitely look forward to how people can take insights from this conversation.